Our shows and truck shows are fairly similar, but something that's very unique and stands out is the truck run and the river run, where a daytime truck show can turn into a weekend of fun. As many truck shows grew, they started to attract other genres of vehicles, but now many truck shows are starting to go back to their mini trucking roots. So for this episode of Influence and Impact, we're doing something a little different. Marcel is not here. He's still fine. He's just at home sick, unfortunately, but we able to bring in the guys from the Drop podcast, Grinder TV as well, Kustom Life. We got Brian and Frank, and you guys have kind of a lot of experience with going to shows, putting on shows. I know, Brian, you've done Forbidden Fantasy show for 25?
I don't know. COVID messed things up.
Yeah, like, skip a year.
Yeah, because it's like the annual thing. But our first show was 1998.
1998. Yeah. So about almost 25 years.
Not far from here, too.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
And exactly. Yeah, our secret location over here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we're going to be diving into the history of truck shows, specifically probably more mini truck shows and truck runs. Because I think for the most part, maybe except for like bikers or something, the truck run's kind of fairly unique to the mini truck scene.
For sure.
You know, import car guys, for those shows or hot rod shows, you're going to an event. Maybe there's after parties and stuff going on, but not necessarily camping out at the show.
Yeah.
Cruising around, all the craziness that happens at truck runs.
Yeah.
So what was your guys' first truck shows that you went to, or maybe most memorable early on?
You want me to go first? Okay. You're looking at me like, hey, man, you go first. No, actually, my very first truck show was the Forbidden Fantasy show.
Okay.
I was in, I actually joined my first truck club in 2001, and I went to my first Forbidden Fantasy in 2001-ish. I might be a little hazy on some of the dates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But around that time. And yeah, and actually the first Forbidden that I went to, I actually didn't show my truck. I went there, parked in the parking lot, and then, experienced the show.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually show my first Forbidden Fantasy show until 2003. So there was that gap. And now that I remember actually correctly, that was not my first show. My first show was Rezo 2001.
Oh, okay. That's a difference.
That's a different thing right there. But yeah, so my very first truck show was Rezo 2001. 2001.
Where was that one at?
That was it.
Yeah, New Year's.
Glen Helen.
So New Year's was 1999 to 2000.
Right.
So I always get this confused with
and
Rezo.
That's Rezo.
Rezo was my first truck show too, but
Okay.
in 1995 into 1996.
Yeah. Yeah, you get there in 95 and you leave in 96.
Yeah,
sometimes.
They're not.
Oh, yeah,
all,
because it just depends on when
depends on
New
the
Year's
weekend,
is
right?
and the
Yeah.
weekend.
So and mine. Funny thing was at Lake Paris Fairgrounds.
Was when they had it there,
which was where. So this is funny. So my first show was Rezo. Your first show was Rezo, but your second show was Forbidden, where my first Rezo was.
Yeah, it all fits together.
Yeah.
I mean, the truck scene in Southern California wasn't it was big, but geographically speaking, not a lot of things going.
Yeah, and there was a handful of shows because you had probably at that time too. You had like the California Truck Jam, out in Orange County, and that was kind of one of the big ones. But then, Forbidden Fantasy was coming along, and that was actually the first show I showed my truck at.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in I think 2004.
Was that after the big fight thing, or I think
I know it was like it wasn't one of the crazy rain years. I think it was kind of cold and misty. I remember it being overcast. I can't remember what if anything happened, but it was because it was a little after. It was the year after my truck got bagged.
Okay.
And I'd gone to some shows, before that. Like I'd gone to Oktoberfest, Severed Ties, that at Fontana. I think that was like the first truck show I actually went to.
Yeah.
But then showing my truck, at anything significant was there. And the funny thing on that is because of that is why basically me and my friends started Show Truck Scene, which then got me into all the magazine stuff because and it's funny now looking back at it, I understand why, but me and my friend Chachi, he had a newer Silverado bagged. We were both parked together, weren't in any clubs yet. And we were on forums and all that. And Brian, SoCal Customs, all the show coverage, he didn't take pictures of our trucks.
Oh,
and that. And like I said, now I understand when there's 1,000 trucks
Yeah.
and ours is like just bagged on some wheels. It's nothing
It's funny
crazy.
that you say that
so
because
he's
but
gonna
that
skip
guy in
over it.
particular. Well, that guy in particular, because that dude would just go bang, 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 bang down the road.
yeah,
you
that's
know?
true. So when your
Yeah.
truck wasn't in there, you're like,
Hey,
No,
hold on.
and that's what it was. There was like, I remember a couple other over there, a couple over there. So we're like, you know what? We both do graphic design. Like, let's just start our own,
Yeah.
website and do show coverage ourselves
Yeah.
and stuff
That's
like
cool.
that. But yeah, that was the first one that I went to. And then Reza was my second truck run I went to. And that was for a reason. So I was in local finesse by that time. And there was the council run. And, at that time too, and we'll get into this with truck runs of the initiation, virgin runner,
Oh, yeah,
truck
yeah,
runner, saran wrap them, throw mustard on them, make them drink beer, all that. Like me and a couple other guys in the club, like weren't down with that.
Yeah.
And so no one else was going to the council run. So like there's probably 3 or 4 of us that went to the council run
and so now you're not virgin runners now.
ourselves. And had a good time, all that, but it was just us, so no one,
So they- but
messing
then
with
they-
anything. And then by the time we were at Rezo, in 2 months later,
They can't do anything
yeah,
to you.
we were already set.
Yeah.
So,
I was so nervous about that because Forbidden Fantasy did that a long time ago.
yeah,
And so we council run in Beaumont, Cherry Valley. There was up there. They had it a couple
yeah.
times.
This one was actually in Elsinore, the one that I went to when they had it. Like,
Oh, so
by
that's the
the
one that
RV
That's
park.
the one that I
Oh.
threw. Well, I was
council run?
I was council
Oh,
president
yeah,
for a
that's
few
right.
years, and
You were.
I
Yeah,
did do
you
the
were.
Elsinore one. Yeah.
yeah, and that's when there was like a trailer park next to it that
Yep.
got mad and angry at
Oh,
all the
yeah,
noise.
they were
I think that was the year
upset.
too. When I think that was the year that like Chad Lucas and like Painter Shack Mike like messed up the truck. Like he laid
Painter
it out
Shack.
on a parking block or something.
Painter Shack Mike's big lifted green truck. He drove it into a tree stump and destroyed the whole
Oh,
bottom
wow.
of it.
Yeah, and
And
I think
then,
Chad laid it out on something.
It was a very rural park, and
was that the one with all the spiders?
the
and
spider
stuff?
infestation.
I heard about that.
Oh,
So
I don't
Yeah.
remember that. But
Yeah, there was. We did it 2 years there, and everyone woke up in the morning and their tents were infested with spiders.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I slept in my truck. I didn't do a 10 or anything.
I missed that one, and my funny story about that one is I was getting ready to go to that, packing the car and everything, getting ready to go, and that's when I got in my motorcycle accident.
Ooh.
Oh.
And I wrecked myself so bad, but I missed that one. But I heard about the spiders.
You heard all the-
that's
yeah, craziness,
the only thing I heard about from everybody was the spider thing.
Yeah,
So
it
that's
was
why I
pretty
was
bad.
like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about.
But for virgin running, for me, I was in council run, and it was me and another buddy getting ready to do it, and then a fight broke out, and the club went over to do this fight stuff, and forgot about us. And by the time that was all over, they were like, "Yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter." And then that's when I took over the club. Was shortly after that, and I just stopped doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think it kind of stopped for most clubs as it went on, and then
well, not some clubs.
no, and that's
some
no,
clubs
that's
went
what
on for a long time.
What I was gonna say is you'd see then every once in a while like one club doing it, and it was kind of like almost like, all right, man.
It
you
also
know,
got to
he's a 30-year-old dude. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It got to the point where it wasn't fun. So it was fun at the river.
Yeah,
When would
where
go
you
to
can
park-
go
where you could
jump
just
in the
jump in the
water.
river and
Yeah.
wash off. But when you were doing it at Rezo, when it was like 30 or 40 degrees
Yeah,
outside, and-
freezing.
Yeah.
No, that was good. But yeah, that jumps us into Rezo being kind of probably the longest running truck run, even though I know Bob's going to try to bring it back for the 50th anniversary, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Especially when he announced it like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
2026 is when it's going down. We're like, it's
All
like
right,
2021.
I don't even think my calendar goes that far forward. But,
No, it's all good.
but yeah, so Bob was saying that one of the original like truck runs that he can remember was called Soledad Breakout. And
I'm assuming.
I think so, Baja Truckers were the ones that put that on. He said they had 600 or 700 trucks. And I don't know necessarily back then if he's saying trucks, if that was all trucks and mini trucks or vans and trucks,
Probably a little
because
bit of both.
all the van runs and the rallies and stuff were kind of what was going on, and the mini truck guys kind
Yeah.
of gravitated to that. And-
Back in those days, there was a truck run every month, sometimes 2 a month.
Even 20 years ago, there was like truck runs like almost all the time. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was 20 years ago? 2004. So yeah,
Yeah,
there was,
that's what I'm saying. Like
there was
our
five or
time.
there was 5 or 6 a year, but like in the early 90s, like I got into Forbidden Fantasy in 1995. So I got in at like there was Rezo, Spring Splash, Endless Summer.
West Coast Nationals, maybe.
No, West Coast took a break.
Yeah.
And then when West Coast came back was when Spring Splash went away. It kind of took its place.
Oh yeah.
Or Endless, one of those.
Yeah.
But so there was like 5 or 6 truck runs a year. But prior to 1995, early 90s, late 80s, there was 12 to 15 truck runs a year. Imagine.
Just once a month. That's what you're doing
every month.
Yeah. Going away for three or 4 days.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Well, no, I guess it would start off as awesome.
Yeah. And for if you're a younger person, at that time, that was basically I always looked at the truck runs as, there's a truck show and stuff like that. It's more or less just lock the gate at a fairgrounds and let everybody just
like a festival.
Go crazy.
Yeah.
And, because you're not going to get into the issues of, going out and drinking after a show or driving around. Like, it's more contained, so a little bit safer.
Yeah.
And all that. But, because, you'd cruise the fairgrounds. People would have, like the hot tubs in the back of the trucks with all the girls or stripper poles.
Well, there was no care in the world.
Up.
The only care in the world was getting off of work, like making sure you had the time off work, and then getting there. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine, like, if you leave for 3 days now, you're like, okay, where's the hotel we're staying at? Like all these things. Back then, it was just got the time off work. I'm just going, and you didn't worry about where you were sleeping.
No, you just sleep in the truck or
just
a
tent, whatever.
Bring some beer and just pass out, and you're good with it.
When I got into the scene in the early 2000s, like all of that stuff was kind of dying off. So like all the old heads in my club would talk about those days, like, the river runs and all this crazy stuff going down. And even though like in the early 2000s, before like, cell phones and camera phones are pretty prevalent, like still wild stuff went down. But I always heard about the crazy river runs. And I never got to experience those.
There was always some of the stories and some of the, certain things that happened. But, there was still a lot of craziness when the runs that,
for sure.
we start going to. But I think River Run, there wasn't really a river run from when I got in, and probably you got in, till
West Coast.
Well, West Coast, but was it Spring Splash or Summer Splash? Because then they brought it back 1 year on Havasu Landing.
They did.
I think it was Spring Splash.
It was definitely the guys that threw Spring Splash that did it. I don't know whether they called
Spectrum
it
Mini.
Brad Rogers and those guys. Yeah. So I don't know if they called it Spring Splash, but it was at Havasu Landing, and I just remember
that was crazy.
There was a huge fight. Remember the fight?
Yeah.
And because I left. I left that night to go to a hotel in Needles, and as I was leaving, there was like 6 cop cars raging down the road.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my tent was right behind the stage. Roulette and stuff on. Yeah, that was a crazy weekend, but that was that was right on the water. Even palm trees and stuff like that, and cruise up down.
One of my first runs was at that run. It was Spring Splash. I have video footage of just us cruising around that run.
Yeah,
and definitely that park was like really dusty. I remember.
Because I think the main stretch was all just
all just dirt. Yeah, Parker was always like the creme de la creme.
Mm-hmm. Which Parker was the
West Coast,
right?
West Coast,
okay. Yeah, and they had Endless Summer was there too, right?
Yeah, Endless Summer and West Coast, I think, were there.
Yeah,
and
Endless Summer. Well, the later Endless Summers were the Davis Park.
No, that was the council run. That was like Nevada council run.
I mean, like the later ones, like in the mid 2010s.
Yeah, so that was.
when they brought.
That's true. They did it for like 2 or 3 years. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And with Parker and stuff like that, like especially, it seemed like each club would kind of have their little spot and their little section. And I know at least back in the day, there was always people talking like, you didn't go.
Oh, definitely.
You didn't cruise into a certain, like the dead end like turnaround lagoon was like Severed and Camber, and like unless you knew them, you didn't go over there.
So my perspective from that is kind of interesting because I came from a small club. So I got into the truck scene in the early 2000s, but I joined a small desert club. And I was with that club for a long time, over 10 years. And so my experience is different because when I went to those, like my club didn't have a spot like that. Like you had the big clubs, you had the Severeds and Forbiddens and No Regrets and, all these big clubs. And so I was from this little tiny club. So my perspective was much different. So where like, your perspective of going down near Severed, like, oh no, I know all these dudes and everything's cool. For me, it was like a myth, like a legend to go down there. Like they're like, don't go down there. And I remember one time cruising down there, making our way in there, and then like quickly we pull in there and start going. How it kind of like turned around. They're like, "What are you doing here?" who are you? And I'm like, oh my God.
It's happening. What do I do? So if you go to beltec.com and put in the promo code AutoRevolution24, you're going to be getting one of these limited edition Cato House Beltec trucks. On any order over $299, so basically all your lift kits, your lowering kits, your performance, this thing's slammed on some gold wheels. You've got a Beltec notch cover in the back. So if you go use AutoRevolution24, get one of these. And for some of the smaller orders, they're going to be randomly selecting a winner to get some posters and calendars as well. So if you go online, use AutoRevolution24 at beltec.com. Now back to the show. Yeah, probably for that, you had to just kind of find a spot where you could set up camp and just
but we still had a good time, you know.
Yeah.
It was always a good time hanging out, and you know, my fondest river run memories were the West Coast days, because like I said, I had come into the scene in the early 2000s, and there were truck runs. There was like Cherokee's Run, Summer Madness,
yeah.
You know, Rezo. I can't remember any others, but those are the ones that I remember. So when West Coast came back a few years later, that's when I got that taste of that river run, like kind of like crazy.
Yeah,
you know, not
the full experience.
Not the full experience from like the late 90s, but definitely got the experience.
At that latest West Coast, it was like 2008.
No, it was like 2009.
2009 for sure was one. I don't know if
it was
it
was like 2011, because I remember we had just started Grindr TV and we like set the cameras up to do interviews. And so that had to have been like 11 or 12 was the last one.
The last one.
The last West Coast at Parker.
I think that was probably maybe that was.
And I just remember.
I know it went for what, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think so.
I know at least 2008 or 9 was like definitely one of the first years or it happened then, because that was when I was at Street Trucks and I remember we had a booth and stuff, right?
I just remember
on the strip.
Standing on the strip, because Parker is like a asphalt strip, campgrounds, like picnic benches, and then the river. So everyone would cruise that main strip up and down the river. And I remember at night you could look down and it would just be dusty. And the silhouettes of the people and the silhouettes of the trucks. And
so kind of cool.
Just
cool
very,
scene.
very cool scene. But I remember standing there in like 2011 or whenever it was and comparing it mentally. Was before it was just this insanity until like 3 a.m, right? Just nonstop. And then the one in 2011 was at like 10 p.m. And I remember this vividly. It was 2 couples with a stroller walking down this.
That might have been me and Angie
going to bed. Like
you're like, this is different.
And it was like, and it shut down at like 11. It was just like there was the people were still partying. Don't get me wrong, but it was just different.
Yeah, different vibe, and that's some people getting a little older, and I think probably the last 1 or 2 West Coast Nationals I stayed at a hotel, you know, versus camping and stuff like that, and I think that's probably what a lot of the truck runs kind of. It was probably hard to get insurance for, especially California, for 3-4 days at a show, and obviously a lot of stuff happens.
Those parks just didn't want anyone back.
Yeah,
like. Because it's so funny with the what happened at LST a couple weeks ago. And the craziness.
We'll definitely get into that. Yeah.
But like what happened at the river runs, those parks, we couldn't find parks to throw the river runs at because everyone would talk to everyone. So if you went to this park and you'd be like, hey, we want to do this. It's a truck show. It's 3 days, da-da-da-da. Yeah. All they would do is this park would call this park. And they would be like, oh, no. These people are insane.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? The bathrooms were destroyed. Like people like their memory gets a little foggy sometimes when they forget that the dumb stuff we used to do.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what's kind of funny. And we'll talk about LST and what's happening with that. But yeah, we've done a lot of those crazy things at hotels, and it was
truck runs. So it wasn't really the insurance side of things because Parker's in Arizona.
Oh yeah,
and Havasu Landing's in California. And then there was another park that there's a few parks that they tried out. But eventually no park wanted us. They were just like, no, we just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
They didn't need the money. They didn't need it. You know what I mean? They were making money on boaters and all that
just your
stuff.
usual,
especially in the
summertime,
and
families and stuff.
Yeah. And that's what that.
Well, and that's, I was just saying,
Parker was turning into that. It was turning to like a family resort.
Oh yeah, they made like that pirate
thing. Which I think that burned down a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it caught fire.
Because I remember the last West Coast, we couldn't go past a certain gate.
Yeah, right.
Because that was shut.
Because they were
so you couldn't go into the lagoon area. That's where they made all that.
Yeah.
That was like the severed part.
But yeah, truck runs were, they were definitely fun and special. You know,
and that's definitely a special, a time period. And then, like I said, they continued on, but like the 90s time period for that where it was just, and that's from what I've heard, a lot of people that weren't into trucks or anything would go with their friends, just go to truck. Hey, you want to go hang out, you know, for the weekend.
Changed people's lives.
And they would get into it and they would see, you know, what's happening, see the party of it, but also the trucks and kind of get into the scene and industry. So.
Yeah, because we would take people that weren't into trucks. They were just our friends. Yeah. And then they see that and they would either get a truck and get into it. And some people it altered their careers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they just...
I mean, it altered my career. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the reason I'm doing this is because of all the fun that I had back then.
Right. Yeah.
So.
No, and that's, you want to try to find a way to keep kind of in it. So when, for Forbidden Fantasy Show, what was the first year of that and where was it at?
It was in 1998 at Fireworks Family Fun Park in Moreno Valley. So in Moreno Valley, California, there was a arcade, bumper boats. It is now a Golden Corral.
That's ironic.
It's also ironic that it's Fireworks Family Fun Park.
That to me is the most
Fireworks.
FFF. Yeah, it was just kind of, the first year we did it. It was actually Ernie Macias's idea. We were driving by Fireworks, and Ernie, we were driving, and he goes, "We should throw a show right there."
Yeah,
and I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." So we did it, and we rented out the entire bottom parking lot area, and that filled up super quick, and so we had to go into the top area. And then the second year we did the same thing, rented the bottom, and it went right into the top. And then the third year we were supposed to do it at Fireworks again, and like maybe a month before the show they closed down or something happened.
Oh, okay.
And that's when we went over to Paris Fairgrounds, and
where you got all kinds of room to.
Well, we only had the one lot the first year, and it blew up. That's called the Carnival lot, and it blew up. But we had to move the show outside, and then the next year is when we got the entire fairgrounds. Okay. So that's when that's kind of the trajectory of that show. But
just keep growing each year over year, and
it was pretty crazy.
What was it like managing that show and stressful?
Stressful, yeah. I don't know. I probably just put too much stress on myself. Like I'd freak out all the time, and like it got so the show used to be on Sunday, and we would roll show cars in from 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
Remember when shows were always on Sundays?
Yeah. Well, and I remember too going. When I was in local finesse, and we had a caravan of probably 40 trucks. We'd meet up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Caravan down there. We'd go off 91 Van Buren and just take Surface Street the whole way. And that was so crazy.
That we did Sunday rolling, I think 7 to 11, then the show, and then trophies, and then everyone would go home. Well, one year, and I think it was, so the first year was, so 2001 was when we got the big fairgrounds. So I don't know what year the fight was. I always forget. It was,
I don't know.
2002, 3, 4.
It had been 2002.
One of those years. But what happened was there was a line to get into that show that backed up from the fairgrounds all the way out to the freeway and down the freeway.
Yeah. And that's happened at some shows. And
the
CHP starts getting involved.
What happens is once you get into the street, then the cops get involved. They can't do anything because it's state fairgrounds. So they can't do anything unless they get a call.
Or something.
So once that happened, the cops came and it was a nightmare. They were just like, get off the streets, yelling at people. And so we had to it went from like 2 lines or 1 line down the street, 2 lines down this street, 4 lines, and then 8 lines into the fairgrounds. And finally, we just started parking cars where they were. Didn't unload them off trailers, didn't do anything.
Just had to get them off the street.
Had to get them off the street. Yeah. So by the time that was over, it was like 12:30 in the afternoon. And at like 1, there was a fight in one of the lots. And as staff, we surrounded the fight and kicked the people out. But what happened was there was 2 officers on scene that we had to hire for security.
Oh, internally in the fairgrounds.
They saw it. They saw all the people, like when you're in high school, there's a fight and people come to watch the fight.
Yeah.
They saw that. They put out this like APB to every department from Bakersfield to San Diego.
Oh, wow.
SWAT team showed up like Fast and Furious, like SWAT came into my house. But SWAT team came in full masks, marching in
because they probably just got a call like, hey, there's a riot.
There's 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 people here and they're about to riot. We need backup.
Not just, hey, there's a fight and it's being handled. Or
so they come in, there's bands playing on stage. People are like mosh pitting in the dust. There's vendors and all this stuff. And they come in, they get on the stage and they're like, grab the microphone. They're like, this event's over.
Damn.
no one on the other side of the show knew what was happening.
Yeah, you couldn't hear it or something.
So we're shutting the show down here. These people had just basically parked from the nonsense. So by the time it shuts down here, it like wavelengths over here. And so these people are like, just showed up. And they're like, now you got to leave. Like,
or you're getting arrested.
Yeah. So it was a mess. And then the cops, after they realized like, oh, this isn't even they were like taking pictures with the models.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
That's awesome.
But that's what's tough sometimes is that the call goes out or something and it's overblown or they don't understand the situation of what's going on. It's like, there's a lot of people here, but there's also 30, 40 staff members controlling the situation.
So that like so when I go to shows like LST, it's like a little PTSD for me.
Yeah.
When stuff starts happening.
When I just see all these people and I'm just like, you guys are crazy for doing this, man. Like it's cool that it happens, but it's hard to throw a show that size.
Yeah. Well, especially that size. I mean, it's one thing, cruise night, parking lot, hey, everyone just kind of shows up and you hang out, but you've got to deal with city, you've got to deal with whatever properties there, all your vendors, all that stuff. So that's the thing. It is a huge risk financially. And I know people putting shows on that lost a lot that had to mortgage their houses and stuff like that to
or people got hurt. Back in the 90s, someone got hurt at Rezo.
And
sued Bob Hayes, and Bob Hayes went through like a lot of crazy stuff.
No, and the same things I've heard happen at shows across the country.
Yeah.
So I have a unique perspective on Forbidden too. So like again, I'll kind of reference this a few times that coming from a smaller club, Forbidden for me was like the premier show for the year. It was the show to gear up to. My small club would work all winter or whatever, like getting ready for. That was the first show of the year for us. And also, my brand Kustom Life, I started in 2003 as a different name. And when I started that brand, I was kind of like, same thing that you're born out of, like wanting to do something and make money doing it while doing something you like to do kind of thing. And when I first started the brand, one of my main goals was only to vendor the Forbidden Fantasy show. Like when I started, I was like, okay, we're starting this brand, we're making these designs and stuff, but our goal is to vendor at Forbidden Fantasy. And the first time we vendored was 2008 was the first time we vendored. But all throughout those years, like as Forbidden grew, you're talking about that crazy show and everything. And as the legend grew of the show, as the show grew itself and people were like building better rides and, bringing better cars, like that show just started to become the premier show in California, at least from my perspective.
I think from a lot of clubs' perspective, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not non-club people, but definitely club people.
Well, there seemed to be, especially, if you're talking California or Southern California, there were kind of your standard must-attend shows. And for a lot of it, Forbidden was kind of the first because I was always in like March.
But prior to that, like it was the truck jams.
No, and that's what I was going to say. And then like the next one usually was like May or something, I think, for spring, truck jam. Yeah. And truck jam was the premier Southern California show for a long time, like especially in the 90s. Like when Al Martinez was running it.
It had like a commercial feel to it.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a little different. And it was, I would say Forbidden was a mini truck show that you then just all the adjacent kind of people, it all kind of started to meld in. But Truck Jam was more like the full-size truck guys. And I remember hearing stories where people, now we look at, okay, hey, SEMA, I'm going to debut a build or a truck at SEMA. They were building stuff specifically to debut at Cal Truck Jam. Yeah. And I think to, your Trucker Magazine, Sport Truck, and then Street Trucks, that was kind of their local picking, show where they would just go there. They would get, features you'd see all the, I remember people coming saying like, what was his name? Anyway, like one of the guys from Texas that would come out in the 90s and see like, basically it was like go see all the trucks you saw in the magazines. So there was like a little of that profile to that show.
It was definitely was like I just recently found out where they did it. The spring one was in the Verizon Amphitheater. Irvine Meadows was
Irvine
it?
Meadows.
But that's no longer now, is it?
No, that's all houses.
It's all houses.
Oh,
now.
really?
And
Does it exist anymore?
Because there was because it was Irvine Meadows, Verizon Amphitheater,
Wild Rivers Water Park,
and it was Wild Rivers Water Park was like just next to it.
Yeah, because I looked on Google Maps the other day and I was like, I couldn't find it.
You're like, where'd it go?
Yeah,
I was
it's
like,
all housing and stuff now. Yeah, you're especially Irvine. You're not not going to have that much open land for too long, you know. But yeah, and that carried on, and then Pierre, Pierre bought that,
Hoffman.
I think, after Al Martinez either passed away or something, and he kind of kept running it and did the summer
What
one.
was the name of his company that he
Auto
had?
Indulgence.
Auto Indulgence. Yeah, it was
that's
like lighting, neon
and stuff. Yeah.
And then I remember one year, and it was kind of interesting. He did, and it was at Long Beach Stadium. Did Truck Jam After Dark.
Oh,
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
And where it was, and this was especially too at the time where dragging was the thing to do, and so they set up a lane for dragging and stuff like that. And I remember because we were before that, when I was in local finesse, we were helping with judging and security and rolling and stuff for the Truck Jam shows, and it ended up like he basically was trying to blame all the guys dragging because he had to spend like $7,000, which now you look at it for a show, you're like, okay, that's not a whole lot to get asphalt repaired.
Really?
In the parking lot. What he was blaming all the people dragging for the damage to the road, but he had a burnout contest where I remember, because I was there taking photos of chunks of asphalt coming out from the burnout.
Burnout contest is going to do way more damage than dragging.
Yeah, because dragging, you're just scraping. Like you're
across.
not doing that much damage. You're not taking up chunks of the road unless it's already damaged. So yeah, it was a burnout, but he blamed it on the dragging because it's the mini truck guy, all that stuff. But
So he wasn't never really like a mini truck guy.
I think the auto indulgence was more like your
a street,
import
like a street racer
neon
kind of
type stuff, and then he just kind of branched in.
He was a huge vendor back in the day. Like like he was like the
remember the
first
trailer,
vendor that had the trailer, did stickers
Yeah.
at the show.
yeah, not just because he did.
And then he
vinyl
had the
stuff too,
shop down in
Torrance.
Torrance, yeah. That, and then he bought Truck Jam, and that's crazy.
Yeah, and that ended up, I know he kind of went away and he brought it back a little bit and went, I remember one year it was at like much smaller scale at Featherly Park in Anaheim, where they started doing the Brothers truck show before it moved and all that. But
Featherly Park's a great location.
it is, they're just difficult to deal with.
A lot of places are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And most nice places, where if you go to a place and you're like, this is really nice, it's going to be really hard to work with.
Yeah. You're like,
a reason why it's really nice.
Yeah. When it's, So I have a question about that too. Bring that up. So Reza with like Lake Dolores at the water park up there. Was the water park still going, or was it already
I don't think so.
abandoned? Or
It was
whatever?
already abandoned, but I have a funny story about that because when I was
So do
council
I.
president, I did council run at the Elsinore thing that you were talking about.
Yeah.
But I originally met with Lake Dolores, and I drove up there. I remember I had this beat up Mitsubishi truck, beat up. I was broke and poor and poorer than I am now, and like, so I remember driving up there and I had a meeting with Lake Dolores, and we were going to open up 2 water slides during the council run. It was like this
really?
whole thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then I remember I left that place and like my tire was flat in the parking lot. I had to change my tire, cut my hand. And like, it was just this, I don't know, you bring that
Just
up.
a bad day.
It was just a really bad,
talking
like,
about that
it was a
PTSD
really
again.
good day and then bad day. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, hey, we can't do it because we're closing.
Oh, they're just
So it went through
shutting everything
multiple
down.
owners.
Yeah.
It opened, went through multiple owners. But when Reza was there, it was this big grand idea that they had. They were going to make it a big RV park and do all this stuff. That was the big plans back then. But I love that place. Like the
Yeah, because even now I've heard talks of trying to make an off-road little park thing in the back and then set it up for
it's just in a weird area.
I mean, it's middle of nowhere, basically. I mean, you're driving up to Vegas,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was
pretty
it
much
Yermo? Something like that.
Barstow, Yermo.
Newberry Springs.
Yeah.
Newberry Springs. That's
So
it.
basically
Yeah.
Barstow. Yeah. It's closest to anything.
I was thinking about this. Actually, funny enough, I was thinking about that show the other day. The year that I went was 2003-ish was the year I went. And I remember going, but it didn't really impact me until like just recently when I thought about how many iconic trucks were in that one location that year. I mean, because that year that I went, that was the first time I saw Time Machine. That's the first time I saw Ernie's truck finish, the extra cab Mitsu. And there were a few others that I'm not remembering right now, but it kind of blew me away, like how many cool iconic trucks were there that year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember that was something similar too with the Forbidden Show, where you were seeing a lot of the top minis and
The Forbidden Show
is kind of there, but
kind of got the fall off of those truck runs because as those were kind of
Yeah.
doing this, we were kind of doing this.
Yeah,
So
that
it was just
became
a place
the spot.
marker to almost not replace it, but like bring your truck.
Yeah.
You know?
It's kind of a key one.
Yeah.
And then, keeping on the truck run kind of thing, obviously California, Arizona was big on that, but then you started to see drop zone up in, Oregon, Tex-Mex, started up in outside of Houston, kind of got camp and drag, up in Indiana. And I've been to all of those. Have you guys been to
I've never been to any of those.
Me
That's what I was just seeing, like, that perspective.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, but I heard about them, and I don't know why. Like camp and drag, I don't know why I've never been to those ones. But they were just like, I skipped a year, and then the next year when I was going to go, they weren't around. Like at least for the Texas one.
Tex-Mex, yeah, because that closed.
That closed.
Stopped after.
Camp and drag is still around, and camp and drag is one of those ones. I just haven't had a vehicle, and I wanted to take a truck to that show.
Camp and drag is it was a cool spot because it's kind of just your wilderness, like campground. I mean, to me, it's like what a campground is because it's forest and there's a lake and it's just a huge open grass area for all the show and stuff like that.
I want to take an RV to that and be comfortable.
Well, that's also too is it's Indiana in I think July or something, so it's humid. Yeah.
But the Northwest drop zone was pretty infamous.
Yeah.
And then up until just recently, in that same location, they had the Relax in Northwest truck run.
Yeah.
That was my experience. I never made it to a drop zone, but I always
drop zone was
heard about it.
cool, and because it was at the fairgrounds there, and I want to say the first year I went there, I flew there. I want to say I gave you my tent to take up there.
It probably
Galen, maybe
Galen, because they took my truck, my Titan up there. It was Galen and Little Brian and Big Steve, I think, and they all crammed into the Titan. And
I remember I dropped my tent off there, because I was flying.
I used to just let my people borrow my truck. Remember when they ran over the car?
I was just going to bring that up because there's that wasn't a truck run, but that was Havasu Havoc.
Yeah.
So Truckin' Magazine put that on. Eddie Sabreco, who did Blood Drag as well out in Florida and stuff like that. They did a rally with a couple stops and like lunch at Hooters and big old little thing. And then I think we were following Little Brian in your Titan when it was all crazy lifting.
Yeah.
And of course it's Friday afternoon traffic trying to get up, get to Havasu. And I just remember getting a phone call like, hey, I just ran over someone's car.
And that's the one where Little Brian paid him off, right?
No. It gets even better.
They had to use the insurance. Little Brian's insurance or the car, I don't know, but Little Brian's driving. He can't see who's in the right lane.
Yeah.
And it's dead stopped. So he wants to exit the freeway. So he just gets over and he can't steer, like he can't turn. He's like,
what's happening? What's
happening?
wrong?
So he just turns harder and hits the gas and
just monster trucks.
Yeah. Just busted out the back windows of this Ford Taurus and all this stuff. And then, it didn't do any damage to the truck, but they exchanged information, but then they ran out of gas.
Well, I was going to bring that. So from what I remember, the person he hit, it was like a company car
for Chevron or something.
For somebody,
really?
for a gas company,
Yeah.
basically, Chevron or whoever it was. And then, this was at the time too when gas prices were crazy in California. So we were, in a communication, we were like, hey, let's just get over the border into Arizona and fill up there. Cause we were like both kind of almost, empty, but we didn't want to spend the money. So it turned out then the Titan ran out of gas completely. And I think it cost like $40 or something just for a gas can. Like, because you go to a gas station and go, hey, can I get a gas can?
There was a gas can and gas in the bed that I left back there. And
Oh,
they
but they didn't know.
That's hilarious.
That would have
because I remember we went and picked up the gas can.
Yeah.
But it's like you go into a gas station and say, hey, I need a gas can. They're going to be like, all right, $50.
Yeah.
They're not going to sell it for a regular price.
Right.
So I went and did that. So that was the funny. It was like karma from running over the,
So
the Chevron
so many
car.
Titan.
I know. It's insane.
Yeah.
But that was which show was that again? That was the
Havasu Havoc. So that was Truckin's like show because they would do some shows like the Trucking Nationals they did, I think, in Phoenix.
In Phoenix, that was when and they did a big cruise from SoCal to
yeah,
Phoenix.
they would always do a cruise in some fashion. It seemed like that, and I know they did one downtown Las Vegas.
Fresno.
Yeah, they did a Fresno Havoc.
Yep.
And then the Havasu Havoc was kind of a big thing, and that was not, it was Havasu, but no one was camping and stuff. It was all, everyone was staying in a hotel. But then
It seemed like that era of shows was like trying to get to. It was like when we did truck runs when we were younger, we didn't care about where we slept.
Yeah.
And then we started to care about like comfort and convenience.
Yeah.
And all these things. But around the Havoc times, like there was no, people still didn't have a lot of money for hotels and stuff. And so those shows worked, but almost like, I don't know, it was just this like transformation period.
Yeah, well, yeah, there was that point in time when things were like the people were getting away, and I feel almost like Forbidden. I know we keep on going back to the Forbidden show, but I feel like that kind of set that precedent for a lot of shows where like, people were doing a lot of 3-day shows, camping and stuff, but then it was like Forbidden was the first show because you were talking about how shows used to be on Sunday, and then it got, okay, well, maybe we'll roll them in Saturday.
Yeah,
and
or
then,
vendor rolling.
Right. So then people would start getting hotels and getting down there Saturday and then start getting there Friday. So then it sort of started setting this precedent for shows that like, we can go to a show far away, stay in a hotel, and almost make that like a 3-day event
and that's
run thing.
what a lot of, we look at outside of California, for the most part, a lot of the shows were just one day, Sunday show. But you go anywhere else, like talking Relaxed All-Star or like Texas Heat Wave.
They had to do
something like that. You had people coming driving 7 or 8 hours or more from another state. So they were going to stay at a hotel. And a lot of those were, you drive out on Friday, maybe, roll in some stuff on Friday. Saturday was the main show. Sunday was a little bit, and then awards at like noon or something.
But the truck,
that way you had enough time to go home.
Yeah.
To get back from
and
work.
the truck run turned into the hotel party.
And that's what, So rather than, everyone would usually hang out in front of the hotel, in like the parking lot or like right in front of the front door, and drink and just hang out.
That was the best part about East Coast shows, is the hotel atmosphere.
And it was cool, and like the All-Star event, just as an example, we ended up getting like there was like a new Holiday Inn Express, and they knew the manager and stuff like that. So basically, we, and that's the thing, clubs would take over a hotel basically, where you pretty much just booked it, and like you'd have a couple poor souls that were there. Like I remember one year there was like a family reunion. We ended up hanging out with them. We ended up hanging out with them, but it was like, they maybe don't know what they're getting into. But and we were always nice. Everyone was always nice to everybody. But I remember a couple times at like the All-Star show there at that hotel, the cops would show up and like tell, hey, you guys need to shut it down. You're done. This and that. And the manager came out and was like, we didn't call you. He's like, did someone like did a guest call you? Yeah. And they're like, no, we just heard about, all this. And like, well, you're on private property. Like the manager of the hotel backed us up because we had 200 rooms booked or something.
Yeah.
Like,
a similar situation happened to me at Slamfest in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the parking lot in this cul-de-sac where there's a bunch of hotels in there. And then the cops showed up and they said, hey, you guys got to go back into your rooms. And I was like, did someone call? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the hotel manager said we can hang out out here.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, we can't. And I'm like, well,
this
is private property. We can. We're not. And she's like, well, people are out in the street doing dragging and burnouts. I was like, well, go give them tickets.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Don't mess with them.
Yeah. So,
and that's, maybe that's a good opportunity to bring up Lonestar Throwdown, which seems to be kind of that, Dino's, and maybe if you guys think of another one of kind of like now the premier like truck shows in the country.
Mini Nats.
Mini
Nats has become a big one.
LST.
Back east.
Yeah, I can't think of any others.
There's a lot of shows.
There are a lot of shows.
There's a lot of good shows.
Yeah. And it's good to see a lot of the mini truck show, more themed shows kind of coming back, because for a little bit it was just truck show, C10 show, C10s, lifted truck show, and kind of.
We're almost getting to a point where there's too many shows.
Well, and you guys travel a lot you guys go out to a lot of these events and stuff like that.
Yeah, but even in this, like even here in like in the Southwest, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah. Like that's not very far distances to travel for these shows. And there's just a lot. People are having to like choose which ones to go to, and it's kind of,
Which is a cool problem to have.
it is a good
No,
problem
it is
to have.
good. Yeah, because you can, because I remember even back in California, there was like, for just a truck show, there was every weekend there was a cruise night or a truck show somewhere you could go to pretty much.
But I think like as far as big shows, I think for mini truckers, mini nats.
No, for sure.
C10 guys have a lot to choose from, but Dino's is the name you're going to hear.
Oh, yeah.
all the
Brothers, probably like C10 Nationals.
Well, now you have like
C10s in the park.
intervention, slow down.
Yeah.
The C10 stuff is endless.
Yeah,
It's
and what's cool, at least with that I've seen with the C10 stuff, is I think a lot of you're talking about Forbidden where you parked your truck in the parking lot and then went in. With the C10s being that it is classic trucks and older stuff, like not every truck in there is crazy wild builds.
Yeah,
maybe it's just stock, but kept
Yeah.
nice from 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's inclusive of that where it's just, hey, you got a C10. It's
it-
cool.
It's definitely a different thing because like you
Yeah.
can't take like a stock 2001 Nissan Frontier and drive it into mini nats and be
No.
like,
Yeah.
Hey.
You're like, hey, what's going on?
No one
You're
cares.
like, hey, you got to park out there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You can't park in here.
Yeah, but it's definitely different in that.
But
scene.
that's, and it's different too because you're talking about, well, that's a 20-year-old truck now, but
it will be
C10
because,
being
like,
a 30, 40-year-old. Yeah.
if an '84 Toyota rolled into Forbidden and it was stock and everything was,
Yeah.
and I'll be like,
Kept
that's
nice
or
yeah,
something.
that's cool
Yeah.
now. But it takes a little while for that to happen. So
Yeah.
but premiere show. Well, that's what we were talking about.
But
premiere?
yeah, so it's just back to Lonestar Throwdown because right now there's
and LST is like the conglomerate, like the melting pot,
and it's central, more or less, Texas,
central
so
to
you can
the
get-
country.
Yeah,
Everything's there. You can if there was like one show, you're like, which one show? If I can only go to one year, be LST because you can see the best of everything.
Yeah.
because you're gonna have crazy lifted Texas trucks. You got mini trucks, C10s.
Yes.
Cars,
rods.
hot rods. Yeah, because it wasn't the one that just won. It was a Bel Air.
It was a-
yeah,
yeah,
got
I
best
think
of
so.
show. And you've had mini trucks.
Yeah, and
win
then
best of
and
shows
vendors. So
everything.
you're gonna grab all the vendors
True.
there.
Yeah.
And you could buy merch there. You could buy car parts there. You could schedule builds there. The biggest builders are there. So it's like that doesn't happen. I don't know if there's a show like that in the truck scene at all. Besides that one,
I would say so. Like that. That's the one.
Maybe not at scale or prominence.
Diversity.
Yeah, and and so that's what's been happening recently. And they've been doing that for over 10 years. I remember having lunch at Houston Autorama with Radar and Lonnie when they were getting ready to
Oh, really?
start that show and stuff like that, and went out there for the first couple years, and it was big just even in the first couple years. And I haven't been back. I know you guys have gone almost pretty much every
Pretty much,
year.
We've gone
And
every
it's
year since
just-
about 15.
yeah,
Yeah, and
That's
I think that was like when I stopped going.
And another part about LST too that makes it that good is the people that host that show.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're truck guys.
Well, and that's and it's because you'd get sometimes those promoters you would
Yeah,
call them
yeah.
versus truck guys throwing a show, and usually that will maybe only last a few years,
Yeah.
or it just there's
It'll
some
filter
clashing.
itself out. Eventually, you'll see through kind of certain things. And
But those guys have been involved and gone to truck shows for 30 years. or
they just
something or
they've
more.
owned trucks. They've built trucks.
Yeah,
They've
and so I remember that was like they were saying, make it tailored towards what we want to have happen and what we want to see, and and it's unfortunate that, and this happened like we were just talking about the dragging in the burnouts and the people outside of the show, after hours, kind of causing trouble for the local community that then is risking them not being able to put that show on.
Yeah.
But I was listening a little bit, Ronnie and those guys did, C10 Talk did a little live Instagram, and I was hearing that a little just to get prepped for this. And, they were saying in some of the video that they've seen of, guys doing the takeovers and the burnouts and causing all the trouble, you only saw one or two like registration stickers.
right.
So it was more or less the local
Yeah.
car people that got into all the craziness that, they were doing it because the show was going on and there was like that atmosphere, but they weren't connected to the show, and those guys probably have done that.
And I've
2 weeks earlier,
do
it a month later.
And whatever, it doesn't matter what events. But I was thinking, because we talked about this on our recent podcast, and I had some thoughts. If they would have done that same thing, just in the back of a warehouse or behind closed businesses, it would have nothing would have happened.
Yeah,
the reason that happened is because they did it in front of a grocery store that was still open.
Right.
Yeah, you're just basically destroying.
You're shutting down commerce.
Yeah,
like. That's
and you got your regular just people with their
like,
family walking out.
It was like 7 o'clock at
dinner.
night. It wasn't late.
Yeah,
if they would have waited till midnight, and because we were talking about like the street races we used to go to out here in the Inland Empire, they were in
industrial areas,
10 at night to 3 in the morning.
Yeah,
we weren't disrupting commerce, and once you start to disrupt that, then it becomes an issue. And I think that's like that's really what, like, if they would have had that takeover. Just somewhere it was closed, I think this conversation wouldn't be happening right now.
Yeah. And even if the cops did maybe break that up, they may not have even blamed the show or gotten into the same, issues and stuff. And I remember at a couple shows, I can't remember which one, but it was local people that caused the trouble.
Yeah.
It wasn't anyone from the show. I mean, we maybe saw it, but we weren't the ones, doing it. And then you get some shows or cities that'll actually open up, the boulevard for cruising or dragging.
Mini nats.
Yeah, they'll open it up and work with the promoter to have that outlet, but
alleviate that energy.
And that's sometimes what a lot of it is. I mean, I think we're done with the show. We want to take a nap at the hotel.
Well, I mean,
go out to dinner.
Now
shoot some features, go to dinner, and then hang out.
But I think that's also now because we work the shows.
Yeah.
So
you're not.
If we were just attending the show, like, you sleep in till 10, you roll out,
start drinking. Yeah.
You're not setting up a booth. You're not doing all this stuff, out walking around filming, taking photos. You're just there, and then afterwards you want to. That's another thing that I really didn't think of, because I always talk about being tired or doing this or not wanting to go out.
You're not relaxing.
Yeah, because it's work. I didn't think about, like, what if we were just there.
Just hanging out. That we probably would have been over there.
Yeah, and then we're like, hey, where are we going to go eat dinner? And then let's go and do these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment like about how it's almost not like a predetermined pattern, but it is definitely a pattern. As like, it's someone who wants to throw a show. They have this idea for a show, and the first couple of years may or not be successful.
Yeah.
But as the show grows, that again, it's like a pattern, like that possibility of the locals coming in and this thing getting out of control just kind of grows with the show. So it's almost like a predetermined thing that eventually this might happen,
It's, as things get bigger, there is, always something that might happen. But I've always looked at it too, where, okay, you've got a show of 10,000, 20,000 spectators, and a fight breaks out or something happens and it's fine. Like, compare that to a concert with the same amount of people where a fight breaks out or something happens or something like that, and they don't necessarily blame the concert or it's just, hey, this is a byproduct of that many people drinking and
I think that it is
egos and stuff like that. So
it
kind of gotta.
It all comes down to money too, right? Yeah. So like a concert is bringing in X amount of money, so they know that they're going to have to hire an X amount of security. So it's all built in. Whereas LST, they're not going to hire an X amount of security for the town, the city. If they
for the fairgrounds or
for the
something
fairgrounds they will, but outside of that, they're not going to.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, LST's boundaries is just the show, like how they, unless they do that, unless they like hire security to patrol the town or like local law enforcement or something. It's like, how they're supposed to control that.
But a sports game, for example, they know that things are going to happen outside of, like, especially a World Series or a
there's been a lot of crazy stuff happening outside in the parking lot after a game between
it's almost like they know it's going to happen. So they can, but they have enough money, they have enough income to just be like, throw money at security, and then it's whatever the problem is, it's just they knew it's a predetermined problem. Where it's the LST doesn't have that like money to be just like.
Well, and that's a lot of the truck shows are not necessarily at the level of a concert money wise, like you're saying, where they can afford that. You know, they're either, if it's the first couple of years, or just starting out, so they don't have any police. You know, like I remember when we used to throw the Relax in SoCal show in Torrance, and you know, Alpine, the stereo company, they because it was for charity, because of the relationships, they opened up their lot and they got the permit to close down the street to allow the show to happen. And then there were some issues with people, you know, because Toyota was there, so like parking on the, you know, in their property or being on their grass and, you know, stuff like that. But it then did get, you know, so big that we were starting to outgrow that spot where the city said, okay, you got to hire, you know, 2 police officers to be there. And that was like $5,000 or something ridiculous. And it was, like I said, this was a charity show.
Yeah.
We were, you know, donating to Ronald McDonald House, and it became tough to.
It's because it was a good.
do.
It was because it was a good event, thrown by good people.
No, and that's
Like that's the problem. It's like
Yeah.
a problem because if you have this event that's good and fun, it attracts more people and more people and more people, and then those problems become like 2 police officers turn into 2 police officers and a medic. Then that turns into your insurance, and then that turns into like it just becomes this thing.
That's what
Well,
I'm
and
saying. That pattern as the shows grow and the problems
Yeah.
grow. It's
It's
like
just-
a predetermined thing, you know.
no, and that's so you got to kind of work with that and anticipate it a little bit. But you know, too, there's also shows that you guys have gone to, or I know you've at least gone to, that are out of the country. I've been to a couple in Canada, one in Japan. I know you've gone to several shows outside. What
Yeah.
have those been like compared to kind of our shows?
Just small. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
that's really it. This like okay, so I went to one in Japan. It was pretty big.
And that was the Truckmasters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Truckmasters. It was. Oh, this is bad.
Oh no.
So
Shingo
it was
or-
the Shingo's magazine. It was not the Custom Truck magazine now, but the one that
Yeah,
was
Truck
bef-
Trend.
Truck Trends.
Trends, yeah.
It was their show.
Okay.
So it was just mostly mini trucks, and it was just, it was big, but it wasn't huge, and it was just in this park, kind of out of the way. But then like Australia, the biggest shows in Australia are like a small cruise night here, as far as mini
Mini
trucks.
trucks,
go.
yeah, because they have the Summer Nats, which is kind of
Which is huge, but
everything.
that's- yeah,
That's
everything.
like a roadster show kind
Yeah.
of for us, yeah.
So I went to East Coast Cruise, Central Coast Showdown, and I went out there for another one. I forgot.
Well, an East Coast Cruise,
Halfway Havoc. So
Halfway Havoc.
3 different shows, 3 different parts of the country, all very similar in size. But if you compared them out here, they're very small. So
Yeah.
they don't need. Everyone's just.
Well, and
it's
that's
just-
probably like everyone with a mini truck is at that show
In the whole
out there
country,
in the country.
yeah.
It, you know, so like scale wise, yeah.
Yeah,
it's, you
scale
know,
wise, it's just
Yeah.
so that's the difference. It's just size. Like if LSD was half the size that it is now, with you take certain parts of the trucks out, they might not attract the same types of people. You know what I mean, or the same.
Well, and that's, I know you know, so we've kind of focused a lot on mini truck shows
Yeah.
and, you know, truck shows, but you go to, like, I remember, you know, going to Forbidden or going to other shows where it wasn't, you know, yeah, it was mini truck focused, but that was maybe a third
Yeah.
of the actual vehicles there. And I know you at one point tried to like separate, and because a lot of the nocturnal,
Yeah.
you know, kind of dub urban style, you know, trucks and stuff were coming in, and it's
we needed their money. To be completely honest.
and that's you. It's
we were trying to fill a fairground that cost a lot of money.
Yeah, stuff starts kind of going, or a lot of mini truck guys started building a Cadillac or a C10
Yeah.
or a full size truck.
Yeah, but those,
You know, and those
dudes
all
were
still came in. Yeah,
And those dudes were still mini truckers.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that those times with the Forbidden show when all the dub guys started coming in. It's almost the same kind of pattern as LST. Like we had this like outside, you know, group of enthusiasts who build a different kind of vehicle, kind of like infiltrating this show, you know, in masses and in huge numbers, you know, and like you said, you needed that to make the whole thing work. But
Yeah.
with that came its own set of problems, you know. And I'm not trying to say like mini truckers are good and you know the
Just
dub
yeah,
baller
sometimes
guys
there
are
might
bad.
be a
But
little
there's like
different
a conflict.
clash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like a conflict of personality. There's like a conflict of like you know,
how things are done,
how things are done, or what they think is fun,
judging,
you know?
or how things are judged.
Judging was. I remember that with the dub guys at Forbidden, like that was a huge thing.
Oh yeah, they were very upset.
Yeah.
Well, because that's the difference, and we touched a lot of this on our last episode with the car shows of different judging styles of points based, class based, modification based, you know, to then your, you know, like we, and I think LST and a lot of other shows started doing more the top 50, top 75, and then like a dozen best ofs.
But LST, they have the tops, but they actually hire a judging team to come in and judge. Mm-hmm. So like
it's not the club.
It's not any club. It's the guys that do that. Houston Autorama, I think. Yeah.
Well, and that's,
aren't they relaxed guys too?
I was gonna say like some of those are relaxed. Cause Steve Green does Houston Autorama and Smiley and stuff, and those are relaxed guys. And that's what's funny is like Truck Jam hired relaxed guys to judge all of their shows. When Pierre did it.
But it makes sense because they're truck guys. They know what to look for.
Yeah,
that's the hardest part about judging. Is sometimes like if you're a Toyota guy, mini truck guy, and you go to judge a C10, you might not know. Yeah, the different like what was done to that truck or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
And that's what like even when we were putting shows on or doing, you know, helping judge that Truck Jam show where you we put certain people on certain classes. Like if, you know, one guy like has always built mini trucks and knows them in and out and suspension and all that, like, okay, you're mini truck class, you know, you're judging them. You know, or like a lifted truck guy, if you had, you know, that way you get whoever's knowledgeable for that. But I, you know, I remember especially rolling into, you know, Forbidden stuff and doing it at like 5 a.m. when it's dark out and they're trying to class you. You're like, okay, you know,
we didn't know what we were doing. And we would change the rules on the so whatever.
Well, I know it was always like body mods or something.
It was like, remember back then there was stock mild wild,
yeah,
and then 3 mods you would get into mild. But then like, okay, well, what's a mod? Windshield wiper squirter's the same as a chop top.
Yeah.
Well, and that's I mean, if you really look at it, like the ICA, they're judging. They have a book that's probably too big.
Yeah.
For judging and what they look at, and they have a similar thing where it's mild, wild, mild, wild, radical, something like that. And for them, at least because obviously the hot rods, if you have a chop top, it's sectioned or it's channeled, you're automatically in radical.
Okay.
And everything else is just like mods or changes will bump you up, you know, depending on how many you have. But, and I think too, like with a lot of the mini truck judging, that kind of happened as well, where if you were body dropped, you were, even if you had all your factory handles and tail lights, you're in radical because that's, you know.
And then dudes would try to hide their body drops. Steve was saying something about that.
Just driving just up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really weird. Like, why would you try to hide something that you like?
Because you want to compete.
You want to compete in a lower class, but that's like still weird.
I want. Yeah, the whole thing is weird.
Yeah, you were an NFL player and you're wanting to go into high school varsity or something. Yeah,
you're like, I guess it happens in street racing, right?
Well, yeah, but that's a little different, I think, because you're trying to hide before you race to show off. You know, when you're betting
or when you sandbag a race. Like you don't, and then the next one you go faster. Anyways, but regardless, trophies and judging and all that stuff is definitely weird. But you know, there's other big shows that happen that like Daytona Truck Fest, like Daytona Truck Meet. Like that was an insane. I never went or anything, but
me neither.
That was like all lifted trucks, like, and it was huge. It was, and I think that one, they actually kicked him out of the town too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Which is kind of interesting because Daytona, you got like the bike week and all that stuff. Where
but I think there was meets and things like happening around town that were the same thing.
Didn't also recently Orange Beach Invasion kick out all the
they basically said no the Yee trucks. So like
all of this is very gray area.
It's very weird because like
political and
well, not even political, but like okay, so what is it? How do you determine?
Are you talking about Carolina squat trucks?
The Carolina squat trucks,
but like the lifted Texas trucks, as I call them, those are okay.
I guess.
So it's basically you have to be level.
But how level? Like, do they put a level out there and be like, okay,
But that infamous video that's floating around, there were actually, if you really look, there were really no Yee trucks.
No, they were all the
Texas style.
Yeah.
Well, they're Texas people. Yeah. They're all Texas dudes.
Well, yeah, if Alabama.
I think that Yee stuff is like in the deep South, like that.
Well, that's a lot of it's Carolina.
So
it's, more other southern areas and stuff. Which
we used to call it.
It's funny.
Like like Cali style. When you
No,
roll
and that's
all the
what
way,
it came from.
front
It
all the
came
way up,
from
back all the way down.
like the pre-runner
Yeah,
desert
pre-runner.
stuff out here where you had to be like that for,
Yeah.
you know, for actually being out in the desert and stuff. But I think too, it's just, you know, they wanted to be a big lift, but they couldn't afford more than just a lift block in the back or something.
Which is funny because the
I don't
fronts
know.
cost more to lift than the backs.
That's true.
I just think if one popular person
And
does
that's,
it,
yeah,
Well, I
it becomes
think-
its own style
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, I think it's like everything. When there's someone comes up with something killer and it's like this killer style and everything fits and everything's thought of, someone sees that and like, oh, that's sick. How can I do that? And then they start like, oh man, you know, I really can't afford to do that or whatever. I don't have the skills to do that, but I can do it like this. And then there's like this degradation, just kind of like
it keeps going and going.
yeah. And then you end up with like yee trucks.
well, then when you start to tell people that looks stupid, they rebel against that.
that's
They
true as
lean
well.
into it
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same with any kind of genre, I think, especially something new.
Mm-hmm.
It comes out with people just kind of trying it out, maybe not knowing exactly how to do it or
Or
going
young
too
kids,
crazy.
young kids with not a lot of money.
And that
Right.
too, yeah. I mean, just an example is this isn't what we're necessarily talking about, but like donks and stuff,
Yeah.
where it was just crazy, unsafe,
That's-
wild. But then as then the trend kind of died out, you had a handful of people that kept it going that were doing high quality. We're doing full race engines, full suspension,
Yeah,
doing
that's-
it top notch, and then it just becomes its own little genre.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes some of that, that build up and that popularity, and then gets kind of shaken off all the trashed a little bit to kind of solidify itself.
That's a really good example too, the donk thing, because a well-built donk is killer. Like there's a lot of hate towards them or whatever.
Yeah, I hate them.
and a lot of like negative.
It's just the style sometimes, but it's
the really well-built donks are nice. They're really well built, but then you get down to the other end when it's just some dude slapping huge wheels on a car, without
Yeah.
doing
and
all
double
the
stacking,
Double stacking
springs.
So then,
Spring,
then
cutting
everybody
spindles.
sees that and
Yeah.
they're like, oh well, that's a donk. Well, that's not a donk. That's just a car with
That's
big wheels.
That's
you know?
the yeah.
And
Or
you can
look
apply
at
that
it
to
in mini
anything.
trucks.
Yeah, you
too,
can look at mini trucks, hot rods, like everything.
The primered mini that's been primered for 10 years and no bed and
Rat
zip
rods.
tied,
Or
straight,
the bad body mods,
yeah, the rat rod scene that came from
Yeah.
hot rodding, where then it became
Another great
its
example.
own. It became a pride of point to have crappy welds. I remember seeing that, like a chop top with crappy welds, and the guy was like specifically looking for that style.
Yeah.
But
The epitome of rat rod culture that I saw was same thing, and that's another good point. So like you have hot rods that are patinaed or traditionally built hot rods that adhere to a very strict standard of like pre 1950s brakes and engines and everything like that, and they're killer. They look awesome, and then you see it, and then another dude sees that and says, "Oh, I could do that," and then it kind
but
of
maybe
goes
he doesn't
downhill.
have the skill,
Doesn't have the skill or
resources,
doesn't- exactly. So
yeah, and then it
the
just
tip of that was and then when they started adding junk onto it,
Oh, yeah.
welding stuff to it, and I saw this dude with a spike coming out of the steering wheel, and that was like, and it had written on it something like airbag, I don't know, just to making fun
Yeah.
of something, right? And I'm like, that was to me that was the tipping
Yeah,
point.
and it was
of,
probably
like,
a rusty
it's almost like parody
spike, too,
It's like
so-
when something comes out cool, and then it almost becomes a parody of itself, and I think that was the peak of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so I think we're gonna wrap kind of this up because we've been going for a little bit on the truck shows. What is your guys's? And you maybe you end up getting some hate on this because of saying, "Why didn't you say me?" But what's your favorite truck show? Like either to go to right now or you've been to. Like if I said you could only go to one truck show this next year,
Mini
what would
Nats.
it be?
Mini Nats.
Mini, okay.
We're both on the same page, Mini Nats.
I just think that because of the location, we've had really good luck with the weather.
And what state is that in?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah, it's Maggie Valley, North Carolina. The town.
In Maggie Valley, they've been doing a lot of truck shows there over the years.
They
in
they
that
they do bike
area.
shows. The entire
Yeah.
town's set up for events.
Yeah.
So there's little motels scattered everywhere. So that's the thing, right? There's plenty of places to stay. There's cabins. There's the fairgrounds. They let you cruise up and down the street, and it's beautiful scenery.
Yeah.
And all those
And that's the
things.
thing, yeah, what
and
more could
it's
you
all
ask
mini
for?
trucks. So like
Yeah.
I am a mini trucker. Yeah, I like other things equally, but at the same time, like that's like
And that's so it's specific for that
for mini trucks. So like that's the thing. Like there's like LST is great too. You know what I mean? It's I have just as much fun going to LST as mini nats, but if I only had to pick one, then it would be that.
It definitely mini nats. And you touched on a point that town is built for events, because I remember talking to a local, and they're like, the lady who ran the little store is like, hey, you know, what are you in town for? Like, oh, it's a mini truck show. It's like, oh, that's cool. And she's like, yeah, we have a lowrider show next weekend. We have a hot rod show the following week. We have bike shows. So this town is ready. And you know, I think what happens to a lot of shows when you go to them, they start getting bigger and bigger, and like more people start going, is like those little towns kind of get overwhelmed. I mean, you've gone to like after a show or something to try to go eat, and it takes like 2 hours to go eat just because they're not prepared or whatever.
Yeah,
so that town is ready for that. Like they're always ready for those.
That's what.
And I think that really that helps out.
Except there aren't many places to eat there.
That's true. That's true. But it's a pretty small place.
It is. But I think what the thing with that show is all those little shops in the strip malls, they close. So no one's impeding on commerce again.
Right. Yeah. That's what you're saying.
And where other...
But they don't want to stay open for the...
No, because they just stay open during the day.
Oh,
they do their business during the day.
Yeah.
And then at night, there's no reason for them to be open. So we're using their parking lots, and we're not impeding on anything. So
yeah, and that's what's cool is basically the town's kind of inviting you.
Yeah.
Inviting everybody in. And
I think with any show,
it,
if you're going to throw a show, maybe look for that. Maybe look like the NASCAR tracks that they've been doing. Like they're used to events, so they're not going to be overwhelmed to where, I don't know.
Yeah, you try going, you go into a place or a town that maybe has something, you know, a lot of places that will always have a fairgrounds or something like that, but it might not be kind of set for a car show or a truck show.
Right.
So. Or find someone that, or even in the case of LST, like scour the internet, have someone scour the internet and look for these meat things and like contact the people that are doing it. Like, don't do this.
Yeah.
Like, help us out, please.
Yeah.
Well, and then, I mean, this is getting off topic with truck shows, but like we've got some friends that have grown up and been doing those sideshows and takeovers that are doing them at tracks now and doing them at events.
Wait, who?
So like Sac Speed Shop, Alex up in Sacramento, he's done the track takeovers at the raceway up there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we got him set up to do at LS Fest with Holly to do the donut pit at LS Fest. So like they're trying to take what is
essentially
the problem
and then like
turn it into an event.
Well, it's just like street racing when they closed all the
drifting,
tracks.
Yeah.
And same with drift. Like if they shut Irwindale down, people are going in the mountains.
Yeah. It's,
you know what I mean? You need a place to do these things.
Yeah.
And, so if you shut all the tracks down, people are just going to go race on the street. People are still going to race on the street, just less if you actually have a place for them to do it.
Because some of those people like, especially with the takeovers, they like the illegal atmosphere of it.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of people where it's just, if you had the opportunity to do it normally and legit and have a good time with it and not worry about anything, they would. So that's what it is. But for me, I mean, I like lots of truck shows. My favorite show is the Grand National Roadster Show. But what's really cool is they started last year and they're going to keep doing it and building it, the Grand National Truck Show.
Truck Show, yeah.
So same location, Pomona Fairgrounds, obviously smaller, scale. And it was cool. Like we were probably about 10, 12 years ago, we were starting to get invited as a club to show at the Roadster Show with our truck. So we were like the only late model and mini trucks there. But now they've expanded, and it's every year it's a lifted truck, a classic truck, a C10, a mini truck, a full size. Where like the Stranger, was competing for America's Most Beautiful Truck. And then you had a couple, Aaron Eha built, full sizes.
I think
competing as well.
That show's gonna, if that show keeps on going, it'll be one of those where people like Barsha will bring his truck out, or people will build their truck for that. You know what I mean? Where, like we were talking about earlier, you
had Forbidden or Truck Jam or Rezo where you would debut
LST,
something.
whatever.
LST
you're going
now.
after these. I think that'll be a SoCal staple.
Yeah, and what's cool, and I think they see, and what happens is now you look at, there's, for the truck crowd, there is a pinnacle event, if you will. A high end.
Well, it's like Riddler, like that type of vibe. Yeah.
So,
that was a natural progression of all this anyway. People there's gonna be a point where people aren't building 32 Fords anymore. They're gonna be building 99 Tacomas. You know, but they're going to be
No.
building it in a respect that is like a Riddler award.
And that's, I mean, like you're saying, we were talking about the Stranger, which, you know,
oh yeah, great
was
example.
essentially, you know, built to that level of a Riddler, of an Amber car, you know, and our age demographic is that guy with the 32 Roadster that has some money now and is still into it. And they're, okay, I want to build that Tacoma or something,
now there'll
or
be
that Toyota, but to a high level.
And now there'll be a show where they can bring that
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you guys for joining me on the truck show episode. So
Yeah,
it was kind of
thanks
cool
for
to get an
having us.
outside perspective and, you know, some current perspective, especially from, you know, Brian, you've thrown shows for decades.
Yeah.
and
In fact, our show's in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
yeah. So I think, this will come out before that. So, Forbidden Fantasy Show, Avi Resort.
Avi, back at the Avi. Yep.
Back at the
Since
Avi.
2019, we haven't been there, so we're back now.
Okay.
it's gonna be
nice.
awesome.
Yeah. That'll be cool.
Yep.
And so it'll be a nice little location. And I guess, drop some Instagram tags and channels and all that stuff. It's different than when we're normally doing. It's like, you're already watching our channel. So
No, you can find our podcast at The Drop with Frank, at The Drop with Frank and Brian on Instagram, all one word, no underscores, at The Drop, at The Drop with Frank and Brian. You can find me at Kustom Life, Kustom_life.
And be it Grinder_TV.
Yeah. And
YouTube, Kustom Life, YouTube, Grinder TV.
Yep. And you guys alternate with the podcast on YouTube, on your channels.
Yeah,
and stuff
we
for
do that
the
to just kind of
build the audiences.
promote our channels at the same time. Like when we started the whole podcast, we were like just talking in the truck, and we're like, we should
record this.
do a podcast. So
Yeah, exactly. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having
thanks,
us.
man. Appreciate it.